Hi there, I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Topic of discussion today is the data explosion and how to contain it. Joining me to discuss this is Robin Doss, is Executive Director, Market Growth Strategist and Business Development at DataBee, a Comcast NBC Universal company. Robin, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me here, Tom.
So, with cloud migration, remote work, device proliferation, there has been just an undeniable data explosion. What are the types of trade offs you see enterprises making to attempt to manage and secure all of this data?
It primarily comes down to one massive trade-off, and that is cost. It's the cost of storing all of this data in, the traditional log storage systems that the security teams used to store it in. Traditionally they're SIM. And I think the trade-offs the security teams have to make, they're either sacrificing depth or breadth, or maybe even both. By breadth, we mean sort of the types of data sets that they're storing. So think highly voluminous data sets, like Windows events logs, that contain a lot of great information, a lot of great security context, but it's just like, too vast to store. And then when I talk about depth, I'm really thinking about the trade-off as to like the amount of time that you store it. You're having to make the trade-off of like weeks versus months or even years.
Trade offs don't come without risks. What are the ones that concern you most?
I think you bring up a great point, and I think there's really two key risks, right? I think first, if you don't bring in all this data, I mean, security teams don't have full visibility, right? And so if you don't have full visibility, there's going to be risks that are just going to occur, and you're not going to know where the attackers are on your network. And then the second risk, I think, is the ability to kind of go back in time. A 0 day or a risk sort of or an attack gets announced today. And so if you've only got the logs for, but maybe it's been lurking on your system for like a year. And so if you only have the logs for like 3 months, how are you going to be able to go back in time and sort of understand exactly what the attacker has done to your environment and to your system? So, I mean, I think those are the two primary risks.
Well, you've described a common challenge, and it's one that Comcast faced itself. How did Comcast tackle this challenge internally?
Yeah. We like every other company realized we had these challenges. And so we created a security data fabric that basically, it sounds very jargony, but essentially we just take the log data from the applications where it's created. And we sort of extract it, we parse it, we normalize it into a common format, we enrich it, and then we place it into a centralized location where it can then be consumed by all members of the enterprise that have a need to consume it. And then we have a single sort of golden standard source of truth.
So, talk about the security data fabric, how it led to the creation of DataBee, and how you are now helping external customers start containing their version of the data explosion.
Yeah, so, we realized that Comcast wasn't the only company impacted by this vast data explosion. And so, we have a history of actually taking internal technology and commercializing it that not as many people know about. But, we have a group at Comcast that specializes in that. And so we created DataBee. So it's very similar to our internal deployment, and it can take cybersecurity data, it can take business application data from a vast variety of applications. We normalize it and we sort of put it into a thing called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or OCSF. This is sort of a vendor-wide common data format. And then we will place it back into the customer's environment, whether that be their data lake or whether it be sort of cloud agnostic storage. And so now that it's residing in the data lake, it's a lot cheaper to kind of store all that data there than in the traditional log management tools sort of old. And that's sort of a primary way in which you get the cost savings from DataBee. And then, secondly, you now have this pristine golden sort of source of truth to kind of then feed a variety of stakeholders, whether they be compliance or security teams or threat hunters.
So many potential use cases to talk about, but I want to focus on one: vulnerability management. How does DataBee approach vulnerability management?
Yeah, Tom, great point that you made. I mean, it's like a Swiss Army knife, but you sometimes got to just decide, like, let me focus down on something. And so, I think for vulnerability management, one of the biggest challenges for anybody tasked with vulnerability management is sort of understanding sort of, you find a vulnerability in an application, but like who owns that application and where does it reside on? And when you do find that vulnerability, who are you going to call, right? And so, you've got to patch that vulnerability, but sort of the ownership is sometimes a hard thing to discover. And so for the vulnerability teams, closure rate is their key KPI. So starting with the right team on day one drastically improves that closure rate. But obviously, any big corporation, the system of record inevitably has a lag or it's slightly dated. DataBee, by pulling in all this different data set, all these different data sets from all these different sources, can triangulate the ownership from these multiple sources to kind of give you a very real-time view of the owners. So it's not reliant on somebody sort of 2 weeks ago updating the system of record. It's like to the very latest minute, a real-time view of the applications and the owners. And so, when you discover that vulnerability, the vulnerability team can immediately contact the right owner to patch that vulnerability. The other thing that we also do is we integrate into the workflow ticketing systems, so we can sort of automate the creation of those ticketing sort of vulnerabilities and sort of force those into the right owners, and that kind of helps them. And then the other thing that's really sort of worth mentioning is sort of for a lot of these teams, there's this mundane, repetitive task of like tracking down and validating the owners of the application and assets, which to us seemed like a perfect application for the use of AI. A mundane, repetitive, boring task that sort of sucks the life out of the analysts. And so we created DataBee BeeKeeper, which basically automatically goes out into the enterprise and sort of talks to potential owners of these assets and applications to kind of identify them, update the system of record. And we think this is phenomenal because this then frees up the analyst to then go and do the more higher value strategic types of hunts and threats, and really kind of enables them to sort of not get their energy drained by these sort of day in, day out tasks, but like actually sort of be more strategic and actually go do the higher value sort of exciting stuff.
Robin, that's an excellent example. Now, where can our viewers go to learn more about DataBee and how they can avoid data management trade-offs in their own organizations?
Yeah, so viewers of this video can reach out to me directly at DataBee, so that's DATABEE _ info at comcast.com. And they can also go to our website, which is comcasttechnologysolutions.com/databee.
Very good. Again, the topic has been data explosion, how to contain it. You just heard from Robin Das with DataBee, a Comcast NBC Universal company. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your attention today.